What if I told you that a $300 soundbar made me sell my $2,000 home theater? It sounds crazy, right? But what happened next completely changed how I experience sound. And it might just change yours too. Get ready, because this story is nothing like you expect. Part 1. The breaking point. Why I let go of my $2,000 setup. When the dream turns into a burden. Owning a $2,000 home theater should feel like the ultimate achievement for any movie or music lover. The polished black towers, the gleaming amplifier, the countless cables neatly, or not so neatly, tucked away, it all screamed premium. But after months of ownership, I began to realize something disturbing. The dream had slowly turned into a daily frustration. Every movie night felt like a chore, every music session started with a sigh. The sheer complexity of getting it all to work was exhausting. One wrong cable, one software update, and the whole experience would grind to a halt. It wasn't the cinematic escape I had imagined. It was a puzzle I had to solve every single time. And deep down, I began to ask myself a dangerous question. Was all this hassle really worth the price? The hidden costs nobody talks about. The purchase price was only the beginning. This premium system constantly demanded more. More upgrades, more maintenance, more accessories. If a cable went bad, it wasn't a simple replacement. It had to be a specific, overpriced cable. If I wanted to stream music, I had to deal with multiple apps that barely talked to each other. And then there was the space. It took over my living room like an unwanted roommate, dictating where my furniture could and couldn't go. It was as if I was living for the system instead of it serving me. The final straw. That moment when I realized I had spent over an hour setting up a simple Friday movie night, only for my partner to fall asleep before the film even started. The system wasn't adding joy anymore, it was stealing time. The moment the cracks became too big to ignore. One night, in the middle of an intense scene, the sound dropped for no reason. Silence. Not a cable issue, not a power outage, just the system deciding to stop. As I sat there in the quiet, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of equipment, I felt something shift. The excitement I once felt had been replaced by frustration, the pride replaced by regret. And here's the part one didn't expect. The very next day, I caught myself looking online at budget soundbars. It wasn't that I wanted to replace my setup, at least, that's what I told myself. But a small, persistent thought kept whispering. What if there's an easier way? What if I could get 90% of the experience without 90% of the headache? I didn't know it yet, but the $2,000 fortress I had built was about to crumble. Part 2, meeting the $300 Contender. First impressions that surprised me. The day the box arrived. When the delivery guy handed me the box, I almost laughed. This was it. A single box, light enough to carry with one hand, was going to challenge my towering, multi-piece home theater setup. Everything about it seemed to scream, toy, compared to the heavyweight champion sitting in my living room. But there was also something unsettling about how simple it all looked, almost as if it was confident in its own ability. My mind kept swinging between disbelief and curiosity. Could this little box really stand a chance? Or was I about to confirm my suspicion that budget was just a polite word for compromise? Unboxing the unexpected. Cutting through the tape and lifting the flaps, I expected flimsy plastic, cheap finishes, maybe even that hollow sound when you tap on it. Instead, what I found was something entirely different. The soundbar had weight, not heavy like an anchor, but solid in a way that spoke of decent construction. The materials felt smooth, the buttons had a satisfying click, and even the remote felt more premium than I had anticipated. No tangle of wires, no intimidating manual thicker than a novel. Just a clean, compact design that somehow looked like it belonged in a modern living room. It was strange. I wasn't even a fan yet, but I was already respecting it. The question that kept me awake. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. This $300 Contender was now sitting silently under my TV, almost taunting me to press the power button. But my pride wasn't ready to let go of the home theater just yet. Could something this affordable actually make me question the value of my $2,000 setup? I decided I wouldn't judge until I heard it in action. But there was a tension building inside me, a mixture of excitement and dread. Because if this soundbar impressed me even slightly, it might just be the start of an unthinkable decision. And deep down, I already knew something was about to change. 3. Setup reality. Wires versus simplicity showdown. When your dream setup becomes a wiring nightmare. Owning a $2,000 home theater wasn't just about enjoying movies. It was about managing chaos. Behind that sleek TV cabinet, it looked like a jungle of wires had declared war. HDMI cables, speaker wires, optical cables, power cords, each one with its own special rule about where it could or couldn't go. One wrong connection and suddenly, the subwoofer wouldn't work or the center channel would go silent. Setting it up the first time felt like assembling a spaceship from scratch. It took hours, sometimes days, to get everything running perfectly, only for a firmware update or a loose cable to throw everything back into chaos. The frustration didn't end after setup. It lived there, behind the TV, every single day. The tools, the time, the headaches. A proper home theater setup demands more than just money. It demands patience and tools you probably don't even own. Screwdrivers, cable ties, measuring tapes for speaker distances, and an endless amount of trial and error. Even after the speakers were positioned just right, my living room looked like a tech repair shop exploded in the middle of it. And every time I moved furniture or changed a device, I'd find myself crawling on the floor, sweating under the TV stand, praying I wouldn't accidentally unplug the wrong thing. It was supposed to be a luxury, but it began to feel like a job. Plug, play, and done. Then came the $300 soundbar, and the setup experience felt like cheating. I placed it under the TV, plugged in the power cable, connected one HDMI ARC cable, and it was ready. No complicated calibration, no crawling behind furniture, no panic about mismatched speaker distances. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. And in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. All those years of wiring complexity hadn't actually made my movies sound better. It had just made me feel like I was working for it. But here's the thing. If it's this easy, can it really deliver the same thrill? That question lingered in my mind like an unanswered challenge. 4. Sound Showdown budget versus premium in the real world. The first test, music that exposes everything. Music doesn't lie. If a speaker struggles with clarity or balance, it's immediately obvious. I started with one of my go-to test tracks, a slow piano intro with rich bass undercurrents. On the $2,000 system, the notes had weight and dimension, filling the room with a three-dimensional warmth. The $300 soundbar? It didn't quite match the physical depth, but the clarity was shockingly good. Vocals cut through with precision, instruments sounded crisp, and the bass, while not as chest-thumping, was far cleaner than I expected. There was no muddy boom, no distortion at high volume. And that's when I felt a strange mix of excitement and disbelief, because this wasn't supposed to happen. Movies that should have exposed the weakness. Next came movies, the real battlefield. I queued up an action sequence with Dolby Atmos, the kind of scene designed to push premium setups to their limits. Explosions roared, bullets zipped past, dialogue fought for attention, and here's where I braced myself for disappointment. Except it didn't come. The soundbar held its ground, delivering surprisingly convincing surround effects through clever audio processing. Dialogue was crystal clear, even in the middle of chaos, a problem my $2,000 system sometimes struggled with. Yes, the soundstage wasn't as physically wide, and the height effects weren't quite theater-like. But my brain kept whispering, "Are you sure you need all that extra gear for this?" The unexpected winner in gaming. Gaming was supposed to be the $2,000 system's home turf. With a full speaker array, directional audio in games feels alive. Footsteps behind you, distant gunfire, wind sweeping across a map. But something unexpected happened. The soundbar's low-latency mode and precise dialogue handling made gaming feel snappier, more immediate. It was more intimate, more focused, without drowning me in excessive reverb. The home theater felt cinematic, yes, but slower, less precise. That's when it hit me. Sometimes more isn't better, it's just more. And the biggest shock. For certain games, I actually preferred the soundbar. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. 5. The hidden strengths, features that caught me off guard. When technology surprises you in the best way. I didn't expect much beyond basic sound from a $300 soundbar. In my mind, budget meant bare bones. But as I dug through its settings and features, it became clear this little bar was hiding more tricks than some systems 5 times its price. Built-in Bluetooth streaming that didn't lag or drop. Check. A sleek, intuitive app for fine-tuning sound without needing a maze of remote buttons? Check. And then there was auto-calibration, a feature my $2,000 setup didn't even have. The soundbar listened to the room, measured the acoustics, and adjusted itself for the best possible audio. It felt like magic. With my old system, I had to wrestle with a complicated manual setup that took over an hour just to get close to balanced sound. Here, it was done in under a minute, and it actually worked. The real surprise came with the wireless capabilities. My $2,000 setup required careful cable management, long HDMI runs, and extra adapters just to get everything talking to each other. This soundbar, it paired seamlessly with my TV, my phone, even my voice assistant, without me touching a single wire. I could pause a movie just by speaking, or switch from Netflix to Spotify without hunting for remotes. And while these may sound like small conveniences, the reality is they change the way you use your system every single day. They remove friction, and when there's less friction, you enjoy the product more. But here's the part that still gets me. Some of these conveniences didn't exist in my $2,000 system at all. For all its power and prestige, it was stuck in an older mindset, more focused on raw performance than day-to-day enjoyment. This soundbar wasn't just competing. In certain areas, it was outclassing a high-end system. And that's when I started asking myself the question no gearhead wants to ask. If this cheaper device gives me more joy in daily use, does that make it the better investment? The little details that change everything. It's the tiny features you don't notice at first that make you realize how much thought went into this design. Adjustable EQ presets meant I could go from deep, cinema-shaking bass during a movie to crisp, focused clarity for late-night dialogue without waking the whole house. The inclusion of a night mode, a small touch, meant no more jolting explosions at 1 a.m. Even the remote was a lesson in simplicity. Just the buttons you need logically placed, without the overwhelming clutter of a full AV receiver controller. One of my biggest frustrations with my old system was the constant updating and compatibility issues. HDMI handshake problems, firmware updates that sometimes broke features, and the never-ending hunt for the right cable. With the soundbar, updates happened quietly in the background, adding features I didn't even know I wanted, like enhanced voice clarity for live sports broadcasts. It wasn't just about having features. It was about how seamlessly they integrated into my life. And yet, this all raised a question in my mind that I wasn't ready to answer. If convenience and smart integration now matter as much as raw audio power, have we been measuring value the wrong way all along? 6. Gains and sacrifices, the honest truth. Where the soundbar wins without a fight. Let's be brutally honest, this wasn't a perfect win for the budget option. But before we get to the compromises, let's talk about where it absolutely outshined the $2,000 setup. First, the ease of use. No matter how much I loved the power of my old system, I dreaded firing it up. Switching inputs felt like launching a space shuttle, and even something as simple as adjusting volume involved navigating through multiple menus. The soundbar? I press one button and it's ready. That simplicity alone changes how often you want to use it. Then there's the footprint. My home theater setup dominated the room with bulky speakers, stacks of equipment, and enough wiring to scare off a minimalist. The soundbar was sleek, almost invisible, leaving my living space open and uncluttered. It didn't just change the way my room looked, it changed how I felt in it. My living area went from feeling like a tech showroom to feeling like a home again. Financially, it was another easy win for the soundbar. Not only was it 85% cheaper up front, but there were no hidden costs. No extra cables, no expensive calibration microphones, no subscription fees for certain streaming features. With my old setup, every upgrade seemed to cost another few $100s. Here, everything just worked from day one. And yet, as much as these gains mattered, I couldn't ignore the sacrifices. The areas where the $2,000 setup still holds the crown. Let's not sugarcoat it. The $2,000 system still had an undeniable edge in a few key areas. When it came to sheer room-filling power, the kind that makes you feel the soundtrack in your chest, the soundbar couldn't quite match it. A dedicated subwoofer in a high-end home theater can create bass that shakes the floor, something the smaller, built-in or modestly sized wireless subs of most budget bars just can't fully replicate. Surround immersion was another area where the premium setup flexed its muscles. While the soundbar's virtual surround technology was shockingly convincing for most content, it still couldn't replicate the precision of a properly placed multi-speaker setup. There's a certain thrill in hearing a sound move perfectly from behind your head to the front of the room, one that even the best simulated surround can't fully match. And for the purists out there, there's the matter of ultimate fidelity. In a side-by-side test with high-resolution music, The premium system had that last layer of texture and detail, especially in complex orchestral or acoustic tracks. The soundbar was close enough for casual listening, but in those moments, the high-end gear reminded me why audiophiles spend thousands. So here's the raw truth. Switching to the soundbar meant giving up a bit of that wow factor in exchange for a huge boost in convenience, simplicity, and daily usability. The question wasn't which system was better in every category. It was which one was better for me in my real, everyday life. And that, I realized, is the decision most people are actually facing, whether they admit it or not. The emotional shift, realizing what actually mattered. The moment I realized my $2,000 home theater wasn't making me as happy as I thought it would was strangely quiet. No epic movie soundtrack, no thundering bass, just me, staring at this huge setup in my living room and feeling tired. I thought back to all the times I'd avoided watching something because I didn't feel like going through the ritual. Switching devices, adjusting settings, troubleshooting cables that had mysteriously decided to stop working overnight. It hit me like a punch in the gut. I'd bought this system thinking it would bring me more joy, but it had slowly turned into a project I had to manage. And that's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes, the dream setup becomes the very thing that stands between you and enjoying what you love. When I brought in the $300 soundbar, it didn't feel like a replacement. It felt like a side experiment, something I'd test for fun, fully expecting it to fail. But over the next few days, something happened. I started using it more. Not because it was better in raw specs, but because it was there, ready, simple, and without drama. I'd turn on the TV and boom, sound instantly. No cables to check, no amplifier settings to tweak, no delay in audio syncing. And as strange as it sounds, that simplicity gave me more joy than the so-called perfect sound my $2,000 setup could deliver. Sometimes the best system isn't the one that's technically superior. It's the one that lets you forget about the system entirely and just live in the moment. There's a deep psychology here. Humans crave convenience more than perfection. We want our tools to be invisible, not constant reminders that they need attention. That's when I realized the real value wasn't in owning the most expensive, most advanced thing. It was in having something that served me without demanding my time and energy in return. The final decision, walking away without regret. The day I decided to sell my $2,000 home theater, I expected to feel a wave of regret. This was, after all, a system I'd saved for, dreamed about, and proudly showcased. But instead, I felt something else, relief. My living room looked cleaner, my mind felt lighter, and my evenings were suddenly more relaxed. I didn't have to prepare to watch something anymore. I could just watch. And with the $300 soundbar filling the room with rich, balanced audio, I wasn't sitting there thinking about what I'd lost. In fact, I realized I was enjoying my movies more because my focus was finally on the story, not the settings. Was it a sacrifice in some areas? Of course. The home theater still had more raw power, a deeper bass extension, and that enveloping surround bubble that only a multi-speaker setup can create. But here's the thing, I didn't miss it as much as I thought I would. Because what I gained was peace of mind, ease of use, and a willingness to actually use my setup every single day. That $2,000 beast was like a sports car I only drove on weekends. The soundbar was like a reliable, fun little car I could take anywhere, anytime, without thinking twice. And here's the part that might shock you. The decision didn't feel like a downgrade at all. It felt like a level up in my lifestyle. I was no longer chained to a system that demanded my energy. I had one that fits seamlessly into my life. That's why the $300 soundbar won. Not because it outperformed the $2,000 setup in every metric, but because it understood something the expensive system didn't. That the best technology is the one you actually want to use every single day. And that's how a $300 soundbar dethroned my $2,000 setup. Sometimes less really is more. Subscribe for more brutally honest tech reviews, and let me know, would you make the switch? Check the links below if you're ready to hear the difference.